Hey Covalence friends, I hope you're enjoying this series thus far. We last left off on creating some middlewares and validating our users' tokens, so now we actually have everything we need for authentication just to get everything up and running at the moment. So let's go ahead and jump in and get everything tested. I've got Postman up already, and I created a new collection and a new login request. I haven't actually run anything yet, so let me go ahead and get some dev scripts up and running because I've neglected to do that. So we'll install nodemon, and I also need to install tsnode. Alright, let me go ahead and add a dev script. Nodemon source server.ts. Right, do I have one? You know, I actually don't. We've gone through everything from like a really granular low-level piece upwards, but I actually haven't created my server quite yet, so let's do just that. Alright, we're creating a new Express app. Alright, let's go ahead and import my routes. Let's turn on my JSON body parser. And we should have everything linked up. So let's go ahead and actually get this up and running. Cool. So now that I actually have a server, we can start executing requests, however videos in we are. I think this is video 5. And I should be able to register, or I should be able to hit the register route. So I need to be able to provide a name, email, username, etc. And we are actually making some communication. So our validation is yelling at me for missing some fields. Excellent. Email, test@test.com. Password, hunter2. My classic go-to fields here. Let's go and double check what I need to register. So email, password, username, and name. Username is Nunya. Name is business. Alright, this should be all I need to register. So excellent. We even have our user's ID bounced back, just as some nifty extra context. Let's go ahead and log in. So I don't automatically log the user in upon registration, which is something I typically do, but given that I want to make email validation a part of this application, I'm instead going to not do anything upon registration except send out the validation email. For now though, I do let my users log in. So I'll make a new request to auth login. And we can either we can log in either with the username or the email. There we go. So I'll try using the username here actually. Although, let me double check my code. Let's see. My registration or my login code should be looking at using that dynamic column Okay, we are. So I can look up by username or email. Excellent. So that regular expression is going to determine that Nunya is not in the format of an email. So instead, what it will do is it's going to say, okay, well, we'll determine that's a username, so it'll use the column username in that dynamic query. And here we go, we have our token, so excellent. Let's see if I can make a request. So as far as my routes go, there's nothing on the API side of things. So I need to make a quick little like sample dummy route so that way I can at least apply these middlewares on it. So like API, let me make a GET request that says hello. Now, I do have this API index. I do have it sitting behind that middleware. So here, I do have to be a valid logged in user in order to access that router there. So we'll be able to test our middleware's functionality now. So I need to make a GET request in here. And we're going to get our middleware saying like, hey, we don't have any auth headers set. So auth, I need to set my headers. I need to provide a bearer token here. If I put something garbage here like pizza, I'm going to get an error message saying like invalid format or JWT malformed. And if I paste out my token here, if I alter the signature in any way, even just by adding the letter S, we'll get invalid signature. So everything's working here just fine. And once I do have my valid token, we do get the response hello. So we have now thankfully registered my user. Now that I have valid user accounts, I can start creating lists and list items and have user lists linked up. So we can finally get the workflow of everything else going. So let's get some routing done. All right, so a user is going to be creating their own lists, and they'll be added to user lists by default. They also will, what I'm kind of envisioning on the client side, have the ability to add another user to the lists. This destroy function is only going to be exposed to users who are the original owner of a list, and that's why I have on every list table a user ID column. That's kind of a bit of a misnomer. Owner ID would probably be a better designation for that, but that's who owns a list. And only they should be granted the ability to delete that. So let me actually go ahead and add that to the where clause here. And user ID, you know, that's going to be derived from the token itself. So it's not anything that a user can provide, it's who you're logged in as. So we're adding that to the where clause. All right, but let's go ahead and get some express code slung out. Excuse me. All right. So let's go ahead and make our post. I need to go ahead and jump into my controllers and start implementing some of that business logic. But I'm still trying to like mentally plan everything out here, so let's condense our routes for now. Come to our API. Let's see, and structure-wise, in a previous video I did kind of break everything up into its own separate thing, so that way I could have like nicely daisy-chained controller syntax. We'll kind of see. I'll play this by ear. Alright, I'll create a create function. I need to import our queries as well, so import lists from DB query lists and import list items. All right. So we're going to be putting these behind, you know, the API middleware, like the token check middleware. So we're going to have valid logged in users. So we will have the request user defined. We know who is actually executing this function, which makes it pretty nice and easy for us. And we are using UUIDs to manage everything. So for creating the list, I mean, we just create a new one. We create an ID here, and then we take the user's ID, and that's really the only kind of like association that we need to get started. Let's go ahead and import v4 from UUID. We get the rec.user.id, save it as user_ID, and let's see what sorry guys, I've had this sneeze on the verge for like a half minute that I've been trying to hold back. List.create requires a new list object, so that'll be ID and user ID, which I conveniently have two variables matching that same exact structure here. In case we have some kind of database error, we'll go ahead and send up a message. Couldn't create list, and I'll concatenate the error.sql message. And we've got to, you know, I kind of talked about this a little bit in the previous video, but I can't, you know, take this catch block here and type this as like a MySQL error. Like, it's just not going to be satisfied. I have to make like a temporary variable and then type that as a MySQL error, just because you can throw anything with Node, so your catch block is going to be a little more aggressive with providing an implicit any under the hood. So I don't know, it's kind of, I wish it would get a little more standardized, but you've got the freedom to throw anything, so anything you catch can literally be anything. And then we do have to go through that casting process, so I can't even just directly assign. No, I can. That's fine with that. All right. But yeah, so when we're creating a list, we're taking like this as the owner ID of that list itself. All right. So that is our list creation. And then we only have the ability, let's see, I named this file items. I don't know why I did that. All right. We'll go ahead and create our destroy function, which is also going to be an express request handler. It's also going to be asynchronous because we'll be doing some database operations. And then we're going to need to take the ID from request parameters. So we'll also need to take the user ID from the rec user. Then for the catching, I'll handle my error in a similar fashion. Now, let's see, I'm probably going to have some foreign key constraint failures here because I didn't provide any on-delete cascade clauses when I was establishing my foreign keys, which means for any child entities, like for list items, I have to delete list items for that specific list before destroying this list itself. So I'll have to do some extra queries in a little bit to make up for that, or I can just migrate my database to have all of my foreign keys use on-delete cascade. But that is a consideration that I do have to put out. And list.destroy, I have to have the ID of the list I'm attempting to destroy, and then the owner ID. So well, sorry for that, Covalence gang. Unbeknownst to you, I had to sneeze a bunch of times, and then I ended up taking like a half-hour snack break. So I'm back in the blink of an eye. But what we were leaving off with was creating some of our list controllers. And so I think I had last talked about like some of the requirements I'll have to implement later, like either migrating my database or at least destroying any list items first that this list was utilized in. And so I've got some work to do to come back here, but for now we'll go ahead and set up a response here. All right. So let's go ahead and export these controllers out. And let's get them linked up in our routes. So in here, in our router.post, we're going to have it use that controller here. Let's see. So let me import lists from our controllers. Let me look at how I imported them in my auth routes, just for like naming convention's sake. Camel cased. Okay. Oh, and I need my path here. Cool. All right, so we've got our list controllers set up. Let me go ahead and start, it's up and running. I just need to get everything linked up with this. So let's go ahead and import this router into my API index. And I think my API index is linked up, or I think I commented that out, but I can go ahead and import it and uncomment that, and then we are fully up and running in order to create a list. So import lists. my auto-completion isn't providing the route link, but that's all right. We can do it ourselves. Cool. So we have some of our API actually implemented, and I'm going to come over here. Nope, we already have the API index linked up. Cool. So we actually now truly do have paths defined, and I can go ahead and create a list. So let's go ahead and make that post request. So I'll come over to Postman, and I'm going to do some collection organization. So I'm going to make some folders that mimic the API structure. So API and auth. I'm going to move those into there. And then in API, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a folder for every endpoint. So lists gets their own folder. And now I can finally make my post request to create a list. All right. Now, one thing that I do want to do is all of these requests on the API routes are going to require authentication, and I'm not going to bother setting up auth headers for every single one. That's really, really annoying. So for a little Postman pro tip, leave everything as inherent auth from parent. So this is inheriting the auth from the list folder. And if we look at the list folder's authorization, it inherits from its parent, which is the API folder, which up to API, which up to engineered groceries. Everything we just leave as is, and it derives it from the collection itself. So on the collection itself, we can go ahead and give it bearer token as its auth type, and we could put a token here manually, and that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So in order to authenticate all of my requests, I just come over here, log in, grab my token, copy, paste, save, and then everything is authenticated, which is cool, but I think that's still way too many things manually. So what we can actually do with Postman is we can create a variable for the collection, or multiple variables for the collection, but what I'll do is create one variable called token, and then for the authorization, it's going to use token. It's going to go ahead and extract out the value and utilize that there. So if we can set the token programmatically, that means every request is authenticated programmatically and automatically, which is really nice. And we can do that with this login test here. So you can have tests execute after the response is received with Postman. So what I'm going to do is destructure out token from the postman.response.json call here. And if the token exists, if it's truthy, we'll go ahead and call postman.collectionVariables.set, and we'll set that token variable that we just established a minute ago to this token here. So that means all I have to do is click the send button and every request is re-authenticated, which is really convenient. So I'm going to do that, and now this is saved as the token variable. So the last nice. The last few digits of, I think my face is in the way. Oh, I'm glowing orange. My lighting changed a lot during the like 20-minute absence. But the 3 digits are BYE, buy, as the last digits for my token. So if we come back over to the auth tab over here, or sorry, the variables tab over here, if we look at the current value of it, we have this JWT ending in BYE, which is really cool. So just by clicking that login button, it sets this, and everything derives that downstream. So now I can post API lists, and it creates that list for me. I just had a massive oversight that I'm just now thinking of as far as my database structure, but my lists need a title. So I don't know how I forgot that all the way until now, but that is definitely something that I do need to add. So let's go to my database. I was just like, hey, I created a list with no input. Like, wait, what? All right, so let's go to over-engineered grocery list, lists, and let me take this moment to do some like evaluation and see if there's anything else we should add. While we're here, maybe I should consider renaming this column to be owner ID, although I still think user ID is fine for that designation. Title. I don't know how I forgot that, y'all. And I'm sure, like, because I'm doing a couple of these videos each week, somebody, like, 3 weeks from now is going to see this after I've, like, finished up the series and be like, yo, first video or second video, I commented, like, make sure you add a column title to your list table. And I'm like, well, dang, hindsight's, 2020. All right, users, we got all we need there. User lists, that's all we need for associating a user with a list, because these are shareable. That's the over-engineered part. List items. Although so I've kind of flip-flopped on this a little bit. So like these would allow items to be like unique to a user, but the more I'm thinking on it, I don't know. I'd kind of like the ability to have like autocomplete just like grow over time for more accurate stuff. Let me break this up and create a distinct items table, and then I'll have a list items table that links lists to items. So I hate that I'm doing that now, but let me go ahead and just get this knocked out the way before we have some like tech debt that gets worse later. So table items, ID, we're still going to use UUID for everything here. So ID, name, that's still going to be, and I mean these are intended to be like grocery list items, so like we're not going to have like super verbose strings. I'll set the limitation at 128. I'll be a little more generous with that spacing. Okay, we'll do that. See, I've got a trailing comma there. And then, yeah, list items. I'll go ahead and make that a many-to-many table. So drop table, list items. And then let's see, we'll need a list ID and an item ID. So now we have global items that are, available between everybody, and that'll let us get some really nice like auto completion on the client side. And list items is what determines what list has which items. So just kind of a little shift, but All right. Now that I've done that little bit database migration, I'm going to go ahead and adjust my types to reflect my current data structure. So definitely want to get that taken care of and addressed. So users table still the same. List now has a title property. It's going to be a string. Title, correct. List item. Let's see, changing that up a little bit. So we kind of changed that to items. So item is going to be a name and an ID. And list items is going to be the linkage of those two. Okay. So that'll be list ID. And I know that this is like a super verbose way of, creating my types and establishing the properties, but I just like that referential kind of integrity. So if I do undergo some kind of migration at a later point, it just propagates. We have a single source of truth of property type, so I just like it. All right, and we probably do have a good bit of our code broken, especially in our queries, where we had created some list item and item code. So let's go investigate that. Let's see what exactly broke. Let's see. Yep, so I'm missing title here. Cool, so it's breaking where we need it to. Although it wasn't lighting up in red yet, thanks VS Code to indicate where it was. But that does mean that we have title from the rect body. I'll destructure out. All right, so now, we'll go ahead and send up a little response here if we've got any missing data. The only way we can get into this request handler itself is by going after the little middleware we defined to check if it's a valid user. So user ID is going to be defined. The ID itself, that's something we generate with UUID like right now. So we should have all the requisite bits of info. We could do some like type validation and make sure like these are both strings and they're both 36 digits, but we'll do some more in-depth validation at a later point. That actually might be it for our migration there. So let me go ahead and actually create a new list here. Body is going to be some raw JSON. Title. Groceries. Very innovative. Not like this is what that app is geared for or anything. Alright, but we do have our list now. One thing that I do need to do, since I don't have like a stored procedure setting up stuff into the other tables, is just running a couple extra queries in the controllers themselves. So upon creating a list, this user ID establishes the owner, and I suppose I should also add this to user lists, although user lists is more designation of like lists that you've had shared with you. So I'm not sure like what I'm going to do to like compose a home page. So chances are I'm going to be using like a stored procedure to do like 4 or 5 joins to get everything built together. So that might actually depend on pretty heavily the list items table. Yeah, let me go ahead and do that association then. So list items.create requires that I send in a new list item object, which thankfully, due to TypeScript's assistance, we don't have to change anything with our database code. And because of the set syntax with the MySQL library being able to unpack an object, we have TypeScript knowing that the object is of a different structure. It's not an ID and a user ID. It's now like list ID and item ID. So, oh wait, it's not list items that I need though. It's user lists. So that shouldn't be impacted because user list just takes the user ID and list ID. List ID property, well, we just generated that with the UUID above, so that's ID. And then user ID, well, that's getting derived from the rec.user.id. So we've got that created now. And so now every list that gets generated gets associated with that user. So like I said, I'm not exactly sure that I really needed this here, but it will make stuff a little more convenient. So the share feature is something that would have had to have required this implementation, but we'll go ahead and slap that on here. All right. So now let's go ahead and start creating some controllers to create items. Just kind of getting some quick and easy routes knocked out and some quick and easy controller logic knocked out. All right, we'll type this create function as a request handler. And let's go look at what we require for the item creation, which we actually don't have any queries written directly for that because we just created that table independently. So let's actually go get that set up. So we need to provide a new item, cool, which is just the ID, which will generate in the controller, and then the name that the user passes in. Excellent. And then I really only foresee a use case for getting all items. I don't really see a use case for getting one particular one. Yeah, we'll go with that. So just get one for now. This query will give a generic of an item array. And we'll go ahead and get these bad boys exported. Cool. All right. Well, now that we've got these exported, we can go import them in my controllers. So and you know, it's another API route. It's going to be sitting behind that middleware to ensure that somebody is a valid logged in user. for creating stuff in like the items table, I don't care who made it per se. We'll just, let any user create this. So I don't need anything from the rec user. I just need the name from the rec body. So need to import v4 from the UUID library. And there we go. And I need the name of the item from the rec body. We'll go ahead and validate that. Oh, there was. Sorry, my dog barked in the background. Lost my train of thought there. Otherwise, let's send up this response here, and I'm just going to copy over my error handling structure from everything else. Let's go ahead and import my SQL error. Couldn't create item, dumping out that wait items.create. We need a new item object which consists of the ID and the name. Very conveniently, we need to make this an asynchronous function. So say successfully added new item. All right. And we also did have the get all query defined, so let's go ahead and create a request handler for that. And I mean, no parameters, nothing really required, so we basically just need to run that query and get all items. All right. So I've got all of these controllers fleshed out. Let's go ahead and add them to my items router. So we'll create a new file for this, items. So, I know this is kind of like slow progress, but we're getting it up piece by piece. We had to go through the entire process of getting our database set up so that way we could write our auth code. So that way we could create user accounts. Once we could create user accounts, we could create lists. And once we can create lists, we can create items. So that way we can finally have user lists created and list items. And that's kind of the whole comprehensive structure slowly coming together. So here I need to go ahead and import Express to create a little router here. And I need to import my controllers, so So we'll make our get all request here, use item controllers dot get all, and we'll make our router post request here. Run item controllers dot create. So now that we've got that linked up, I can come over to my index, import my items. Let's see. Come on, VS Code. No luck. Just like with the previous, I have to manually do this import myself. Ugh. How dare you, VS Code. Alright, but now I have my items linked up. So let's go ahead and hit up Postman. I'm going to create a new folder in my API folder for all of the, not a new request. One big thing I advise as well with Postman 2 is please save your requests and close out of them when you're finished. Just good organization goes a long, long way. Speaking of which, I'm going to delete my API hello request here. And empty requests that were created by accident that I don't need. So get all items, localhost 3000, API items. It's going to be empty. Oh, my token's expired. So hey, guess what? In just a second, I can click the login route and I'm automatically logged back in again. I'll do that in a second though, because I want to create the create request. So get to post, API items, body, none, raw, text to JSON, and then we require a name property. So here I'll say pizza classic Andrew demo, right? We'll get the same response as we did for the get all items, error while validating the token, JWT expired. So our custom middleware is like, come on dude, you gotta log back in again. We're not gonna use those old credentials. So watch this. Open up my login request, I hit send, I hit create, success. Pizza, spaghetti, let's see, peanut butter, tortillas, bread, let's see, Greek yogurt. Trying to think of stuff I need off the top of my head. Rebels, Publix cranberry apple juice. That stuff is so good, y'all. And now I can come over here to get items. Our token's still good. And we are now retrieving an array of items. So yeah, we're slowly getting there. Now, this video is already getting really long, and I've implemented like 2 out of like 5 or 6 routers that we need to. So I'll spare you guys the very boring details of just getting some of the business logic knocked out. But once we get back to some more interesting content, I'll go ahead and start recording that again, and that way we can start seeing the share feature come to life, and then start getting into some actual visual client-side results. So I hope you've enjoyed this thus far, and like I've said, you know, if you've got some ideas for features you'd like to see me implement on this, go ahead and drop them in the comments. That'd be stellar. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next edition.